Welcome to Musicology Lesson 2 with Franz Devantier. Systematic musicology. In this lesson, we will look at my way of notating music for the guitar. The first issue to be addressed, the guitar is a bass instrument. Guitar music is written in the treble clef. Second issue to be addressed, the guitar sounds an octave lower than written. Sheet music tends to sound better in the intended range. Third issue to address, as the guitar evolves towards 7 and 8 strings, the range increases towards 4.5 octaves, the first string being A and the 8th string being B. The treble clef can't handle 4.5 octaves. Let's look at a 6-string guitar, the written range. You see from the low E at the bottom, 3 ledger lines, up to the high B at the top, 5 ledger lines. This is the range that the guitar sounds at, which is 1 octave lower. And if we look at that, we see there's 7 ledger lines to the low E at the bottom, but the top B is well placed. There's just 1 ledger line there. Let's put the written range into the bass clef. And if we look at that, the bottom note is in the middle of the clef, but there's 11 ledger lines to the top B, just too much. The range that the guitar sounds at in the bass clef, now we see the low E is very well placed, 1 ledger line, but the top B is still totally too high. What happens if we use the bass and the treble clef to write the guitar music in? Then it can be written as it sounds. The bottom notes can go into the bass clef. The top notes go into the treble clef. And it's written at the range that it sounds. Preferably use the grand staff. The grand staff can be used to notate guitar music. My guitar notation solves the issue of a bass instrument being written in the treble clef, solves the issue of the guitar sounding an octave lower than written, and at the same time, it eliminates excessive ledger lines. Does this scheme cater for the extra notes required for an 8-string guitar? So let's just quickly go through the strings. The first string is A, the second string is E, that would have been the first string on the 6-string guitar, E, B, G, D, A, E, and then we add a B string at the bottom, which is then the 8th string. In a 7-string guitar, that would have been the 7th string. The 8-string guitar has 1 additional high string tuned to A, 1 additional low string tuned to a B. The highest note on this instrument will be an high E. The 7-string guitar has 1 additional bass string, no additional treble string. Let's look at the 8-string guitar. The written notes for the 8-string guitar, we see that the high notes and the low notes are problematic in that there's too many ledger lines. Typically, 3 ledger lines is, you can handle 3 ledger lines. When it gets above that, it starts getting problematic. And the 8-string guitar would be notated like this with regards to traditional guitar notation. The 8-string guitar, the notes that are sounded, now we see the top notes are great in the treble clef. We have 3 ledger lines, which is okay. But the low B is just too many ledger lines there. Now let's take it 8-string guitar and let's look at the written range in the bass clef. We see that we have 12 ledger lines to the high E, which is impractical. We take the 8-string guitar and we look at the range that it sounds at if written in the bass clef. Now, if you look at the bass notes, we see 2 ledger lines. Now, that's okay. But the top notes, just too many ledger lines again. So with the 8-string guitar, does my solution that we established for the 6-string guitar work for the 8-string guitar? Yes, it does. No more than 3 ledger lines above or below the staff. Now for the 8-string guitar, preferably as for the 6-string guitar, you can use the grand staff to notate music for the 8-string guitar. At times, you can switch to a single staff as well, either the treble or the bass. Probably the bass, because most of the notes, the common notes, are going to be in the bass clef. And then you can switch back to the grand staff when required. Here's a notation example. We have 2 lines at the bottom. On the top line, the music is written in the traditional way for the guitar. Note the low D. So it's an altered tuning. It would have been an E, but we've tuned the low E string down to a low D. That's why we have a D at the bottom. On the bottom line, the same music is written using my notation method for the guitar. In this case, we end up with the last D in the extract having 4 ledger lines. It's not really a problem, but let's just see how we can improve that. Looking at that notation example, my guitar notation by itself. You could address the low D by marking the note to be played as 1 octave lower. That is one of a few solutions. You could also just leave it as it is because it's not actually that bad by itself. Looking at that same notation example with my guitar notation, the solution using the grand staff. It is recommended to use the grand staff, especially for the harp guitar or the 8-string guitar. You can switch between the grand staff and a single staff when required. Now, this is the more elegant solution to the low D question. When you use the grand staff, then you gain lots of space in the manuscript for details on barring, fingering, voicing, and other comments. Typically, in the traditional score, in the traditional way of writing guitar music, it becomes a little bit cluttered, and there isn't really space to put all the additional information in. So as you can see, when you use the grand staff, all the space you need for all the additional information is there. Composing guitar music using the grand staff may inspire composers to explore the possibilities of the instrument more fully. My guitar notation as a solution. The bass instrument written in the treble clef, did it address that? Yes. The guitar sounds an octave lower than written. Did it address that? Yes. The notation caters for an extended range guitar. Was that addressed? Yes, it was addressed for 7 and 8-string guitars. However, for 9 strings and above or harp guitars, In the bottom line, you can use one or two octave transposing bass clef where necessary. In the below example, all three notes are the same note. You see the first note is the normal note in the bass clef, an E, and then the second clef is a one octave transposing bass clef. So you see that E note is written one octave higher, but it actually sounds the same as the first note. And then the second is a two octave transposing clef. And so that E is written another octave higher, but it actually sounds the same as the first note as well. So when you're writing for the harp guitar, by using one of those two transposing bass clefs, you would actually have more than enough bass notes to handle that. My guitar notation. So all that remains is for people to start adopting my guitar notation for 6, 7, 8 or more strings and harp guitars. In the illustration, we see a picture of a 6-string guitar. There below that, there's an 8-string guitar, and there's two pictures of a harp guitar. Thank you for joining me for lesson 2 in musicology. In this lesson, we have gone through my way of notating music for the guitar. In lesson 3, I will show you how to transfer your knowledge of traditional guitar notation to my method of guitar notation. See you in lesson 3.